So, Jennifer Miller, thank you so much for talking today. You have just published a super important piece at slate.com called Mercy Girls. And I understand that it's something that you've been working on for quite a long time. And very important themes about Christianity, Christian counseling, spiritual abuse, women's mental health needs, and the gaps that are in our secular mental health system here in our country. So I wanted to start just by asking, what is Mercy Ministries?
So great. So it's actually now called Mercy Multiplied. It was Mercy Ministries for over 30 years, and then this past October they rebranded as Mercy Multiplied. So just as a caveat, and when they rebranded, they did a complete overhaul of their website, and some of the claims that they had made or things that they had been on their website previous to the October 2015 actually were taken away. So that's just something to kind of put a pin there. But so Mercy Multiplied is an organization that runs residential counseling programs. They have 4 in the United States, and then they have affiliates in Canada, the UK, and New Zealand. And these programs are for young women, mostly 18 to 28, who are struggling with a variety of mental illnesses, anything from depression, anorexia, women who have had, faced traumatic experiences in their past, abuse, and just women who are struggling to find themselves, but very much geared towards women that are dealing with emotional and psychological problems. And the idea, it's a biblically based program, and the way that they advertise it is they say that it combines biblically based Christian principles of healing with best practice clinical interventions, kind of in a nutshell, which implies to a lot of people that it kind of fuses the religious and the secular. And my article focuses on a group of young women who went through the program, who really believed that what they were going to be experiencing at Mercy was this kind of fusion of the spiritual and the secular. But then what they found when they got there is that there really is there's no attention to secular psychotherapy really at all, and that they were not in the care of practitioners that they believed would be licensed or would have training, and would be able to use that training to help them overcome some really serious issues. Instead, what many of them found was a place that puts all participants through a very strict counseling model that is, many people said they felt like it was a one-size-fits-all kind of model, and that so that women who were dealing with very specific issues, having anorexia is not the same thing as having bipolar disorder.
Oh
It's not the
gosh,
same thing
no.
as having been molested as a kid and dealing with the aftermath of that. That everyone's kind of going through, put through this same process, and the kind of pressure to follow this program left many of them, feeling psychologically wounded. In some cases even more so than when they arrived. And then another part of the story, which I think is also important, is there are a number of parents whose daughters went into the program for reasons that had nothing to do with childhood abuse, but then came out of the program accusing their parents of really horrific sexual abuse or just cut off all ties with their parents. And at least in the cases of the families I talked to, a couple of the women, later retracted the accusations that they made, saying that they'd kind of been brainwashed into it, and then in other cases, not just the parents, but people who know the family, pastors and childhood best friends, say it's very unlikely that this type of abuse had occurred. So then the question is, well, what is prompting these women to
Mm.
make these accusations? And perhaps it has something to do with the way in which the counseling is conducted.
Right. One of the things that really struck me when you were telling the stories about the different young women was sort of the theme that the counseling group really sort of felt like it had the authority of God to these young women, very young women, women who had had very traumatic experiences in their past. And they felt like if a treatment that was being pushed upon them, or a way of looking at things, or dealing with their past and trying to heal, didn't sit well with them or didn't feel like it was working well with them, they felt too intimidated to say anything because this was biblically based counseling, and the people there really spoke with some sort of authority that even in some cases they said felt like it surpassed that of God.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about that feeling amongst these patients.
Sure. I mean, so Mercy is reaching out to a large. I mean, not everybody who goes there is a devout Christian, but they do on their website. They have they have a statement of faith, and so most of the people who go there are devout Christians. The thing is that Mercy calls itself non-denominational, and they really say that they don't emphasize any one like specific root of Christianity. That you could be a Catholic, or you could be Protestant, or you could be Methodist or Baptist or whatever it is. But in talking to women who've been through the program and then comparing, kind of running their experiences by academics who study various Christian denominations, like it seems pretty clear that the program is very strongly rooted in charismatic Christianity, and so there's a real emphasis, the counseling model, and kind of implicitly, kind of under the surface, there is an emphasis on faith healing, on prophesying, on the laying of hands, even if this stuff isn't 100% mandated by the organization and isn't necessarily like strictly part of the counseling model, although many women I spoke to, reported activities that really suggested that it was. And so if you are raised in a charismatic background and that is something that's familiar to you, then, maybe coming into this kind of program, maybe you are going to feel comfortable with the counseling model and, with kind of these very strict procedures that you're led through. But if that's not the background that you come from, and you really are looking for something that does have a Christian basis, but also is going to bring in psychotherapy and is going to bring in secular mental health interventions, and then suddenly you're in a situation where your counselor is talking about the demonic in a very real way, or in one case, one of the women told me that the house came down with mono, and so they had them all go through the home, like shouting at demons to flee. And in another example, they had a minister come to give a visiting minister to come to give a sermon, and the girls were all asked to go up and let the minister lay hands on them. And like one of my sources said, she just really didn't feel comfortable doing that. It wasn't the kind of church she'd been raised in, and the staff were according to her, were very, very harsh about it, and they were basically telling her that this is part of the process, this is part of the program, get on board, or we don't want you here. Except for the fact that the we don't want you here is along with that comes the message, but this is the only place that's going to help you.
Right.
So then you're kind of stuck, and when you have young women who I think are already, a lot of these women are mentally ill, and so they are very vulnerable, and it's their illness that is leading them, not necessarily the strong, independent women that they would otherwise be. So I think that there's a lot misleading that happens, and that for women, especially women who don't come from that charismatic background, I think that it can be a real kind of culture shock, which is not a good thing for women who are already really vulnerable and emotionally troubled. Right.
And it seemed like so many of the young women who entered into counseling there entered into the program, which you have to stay there you live there, right? You are there overnight. You eat all your meals there. You are there 24/7 for a long period of time. And it seemed like most of them entered into this particular facility because they either didn't have insurance or their family didn't have the money to pay for their health care. So oftentimes, because Mercy was a free program or is a free program, they were going not only because it was often they were devout Christians, and this is a Christian facility, but also because this allowed them the opportunity to get mental health care that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford or access.
Exactly. I mean, I think one thing that is really important to point out is that the mental health care that is available, especially for women who don't have a lot of money, who don't have a lot of resources, there are a lot of gaps in the system. People feel as though they're not treated like human beings often. People feel like and it can be very bureaucratic. It can be very cold and lacking in compassion. And I think a lot of women feel, they're moved from doctor to doctor. They're in these institutionalized settings, and they're not getting the kind of care and attention that they really need. And so a program like this, and I think that this is part of the reason why Christian counseling as a phenomenon is really booming right now. I mean, there's been a huge increase in the number of people who are kind of going into this field at various levels. Either on one hand, people who have their PhDs or are doctors who are trying to figure out how to integrate their secular scientific training with a spiritual side of things, all the way down to lay people at your local church who want to try to work with the congregation. And all of these things can be helpful. It's just that when you are suffering from a major mental illness, you don't want that layperson at the church down the street. You want the trained doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist who is also maybe comes from a Christian background and is actually working to figure out how to integrate that spiritual side of things. And in fact, studies show that I talked to physicians at Harvard and Vanderbilt and Baylor. And there's a lot of and the academics that I interview in the article, they're actually all devout Christians themselves, and they're all affiliated with very well respected major research universities, and they've all done a lot of research that shows that for people that come from a devout Christian background, and actually this could be true for any religion, but a lot of what they're looking at is Christianity. For people who come from that background, a purely secular mental health intervention may actually not work for you, that you actually need to meet the patient where they are, and often that means incorporating a real deep spiritual side of things. But the thing is, it has to be done in an ethical and responsible way, and it has to be done in a way that the patient acknowledges that they feel comfortable with. And that's part of the problem with a program like Mercy, is that I think a lot of people come in and then realize that they're not comfortable with it. And Mercy would say they're adults; they could leave at any time, which is true. They could, right? But some of the women who I interviewed, they tried to leave. They wanted to leave, but Mercy makes you sign papers that say, you're for 30 days upon entering the program, you're not going to have contact with your family or your friends outside because you need to get oriented. I mean, I can even understand that, right? It's like if you've ever even been like as a kid, like a way to sleepaway camp, right? You might be homesick, and they might have a policy where you can't call home for 2 weeks. Like, I do get that, but then you sign a commitment that says, okay, I'm committing to 6 months. And then if you express your desire to leave, staff may say, but this is your chance to heal. If you walk out those doors, you're giving up your chance. God is not going to follow you out those doors.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. And then you think about the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, part of the problem is that everybody's situation is so different. It's one thing to have anorexia. It's another thing to have depression. It's another thing to have been raped when you were 13. And many of these conditions, as you go through treatment, you could very likely need the support of friends and family over the phone or via email or whatever it is. But I was really touched and shocked and touched by the story of Haley. And you describe so poignantly how her first night, she's very scared. She's in such an unfamiliar place, and she's trying to go to sleep, and she's anxietized, and she's panicking a little bit because she suddenly feels like, wow, I'm here, and there's really no way out. And they give her a Bible verse, basically saying God grants sleep to those he loves, and they tell her to pray. And this doesn't help. I think, she had been prescribed Xanax in the past, according to your article, and they wouldn't let her have it in order to be able to go to sleep. And it just reminds me of so many experiences that so many Christians have had, just in my conversations and my experiences growing up in the evangelical church, of being told that prayer or reciting Bible verses like this are going to somehow cure you. This will help you go to sleep tonight. When you're a person with anxiety and insomnia, that's just not the case. But when you're handed the Bible verse, God grants sleep to those he loves, and then you can't fall asleep, you feel that God doesn't love you anymore. And then you get brainwashed into this whole series of terrible beliefs that actually keep you from healing instead of helping you to heal. What was the sense that you got, because I know you talked to so many young women and their families, what was the sense you got about how this almost, dare I say, spiritual abuse settled with people there?
I think you could call it spiritual abuse. I spoke with a former counselor who worked in one of the homes, who again was, she came from a very devout background. She was also studying to be a psychotherapist, and she said to me, all trauma does not manifest itself in the same way, and so all approaches to trauma should not be the same. And so when you have women who really need very individuated, specific approaches to dealing with what they're going through, and then they're given one way, and they're told that is the way to get better, and the lens through which they're being told that this is the way is God's way, right? This is the way that Jesus wants you to walk. And so when you cannot actually, when that door, is not the right size for you to walk through, then there's this feeling that you're not getting that support from the higher power that, you have come to this place. You've come to this place to get that support from that higher power, and now you're being told that higher power is not with you. And it's your fault because you cannot make this program fit for you.
Right.
And the program itself, the counseling model is called Choices That Bring Change. And the thing is, what's interesting about it is that so everything that you do is a choice that you make. You choose to. So one of the steps is forgiving the people who have harmed you. So you choose to forgive the people that have harmed you. You choose to, make a commitment to Christ. You choose to, not allow demonic oppression to come into your life. But the thing is that all of these choices, these are not all necessarily choices that a person can make. Like, you're given this choice, but you're actually being told that you must walk in a certain way, which is not actually a choice.
Right.
And the thing is, because the counseling model is set up in a specific order, you can't move on to the next item until you've chosen to complete the previous one. So, for example, if you have to choose to forgive your abusers and you're stuck on that because you're having a hard time, really genuinely opening your heart to people who have really hurt you. I mean, in Haley's example, she was abused, horribly when she was younger. Then you can't move on to the next thing, but you're only there for 6 months. And so then if you don't kind of move at a steady pace through the program, then you're being told that you're not choosing to get better. And so that's really what the counselor who I interviewed means by spiritual abuse, that you're kind of using this threat of choosing to open your heart to God, but they're not really choices necessarily. And so you're putting these women in a really tough position.
Right. And, forgiving your abuser can take years. I mean, that's not a process that can be rushed. You're so careful in this article to really stress that faith, the Christian faith or whatever faith it may be, does play such a scientifically proven positive role in therapy or counseling or healing of any kind. I see this as more of the mind-body connection. Even if a secular therapist is supporting you with whatever your belief set is, and saying, yes, please bring that in and use that as we go along with healing, that's very different than a very specific belief set being impressed upon your healing process.
Absolutely. What's interesting is the Association of Christian Counselors, a large umbrella organization that kind of houses this movement toward Christian-based counseling, and they have a code of ethics, which is it's very specific. It's pages and pages, and it really lists out the ways in which this type of fusion of the secular and the spiritual can be done in a responsible way. And I think that, and I really think that it can be. I think that part of the problem with our country's mental health system is that it really doesn't. I mean, the national because there's this separation of church and state, right? So you cannot have, obviously, the government regulating Christian mental health specifically, but it leads to this problem where there's a total lack of oversight.
Right.
And so I think that for Christians or people who are devout of any faith who really want to have that spiritual component, I think you should search it out. It could help you in ways that the purely secular system doesn't. But you've got to make sure that the people that you're going to see are licensed practitioners. And the AACC, like, the thing that's really good about it is they actually let you see what people's credentials are. You can actually plug in to their website. You can say, where you're living, and then you can say the type of counselor that you want to see, and you can see specifically what their credentials are. And so you can really be specific about it. The problem is that you want to steer clear of an organization that may be using the terminology of the secular mental health world, but is not actually practicing it. And that's part of the problem with Mercy, is that they're using words like best practice clinical intervention. They're boasting about how well trained their counselors are. That 80% of their counselors have master's degrees in psychology or social work or a related field, which may be true, but they're not actually using that knowledge. They're not allowed to use that knowledge. They're only following the 7-step model.
A lot of semantics, right? A lot of language that doesn't make it very clear what a young woman is going to experience once she gets there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's strange. I mean, it's really interesting that an organization that is so intent on having everyone go through this very specific model is promoting itself as offering these other things that when you really dig in, they're very open with me. When I went out to the California home, which was the home that Haley attended and Lily attended, and some of the women who had cut off ties with their parents had also attended that home as well. And that home actually is licensed by social services, which is only a question of they have to have proper fire exits, and it's not about the actual therapy that is provided there. But I went out there. I met with Haley's therapist. I met with the executive director of the program, and when I asked her, what does best practice clinical interventions really mean? She said, well, it means Christian counseling. That's the only thing that it means. Huh. Except for a lot of people have come into the program thinking that they're going to get, there's something about that message that is not adding up. There's something that's being overtly misleading. And it's unclear to me why, aside from fundraising maybe.
Yeah.
Why they wouldn't just be extremely upfront about what they do offer and what they don't offer. Because the program, the doctors that I talked to said to me, this program could help some women who don't have serious mental illness, right? If you're looking for structure, if you're looking for direction, if you come from, a charismatic background. I mean, Mercy would fervently disagree that they are a charismatic organization, but if you come, if you don't have these serious problems, you could come and telling you how to live well, how to live in this way, giving this structure, right? Doctors told me that this could help some women, but not if you've got suicidal ideation, or you're anorexic, or you've got bipolar disorder, or you're dealing with traumatic abuse from your childhood. That is going to be a much more difficult and potentially dangerous situation.
Right. Jennifer, I'm curious, how did you get tipped off to this story, and what drew you to this story? Why did you want to investigate this?
Yeah. Well, so I found out about Mercy a number of years ago through a young woman I know on Twitter who had been to a discipleship program called the Master's Commission, and it was supposed to be a 1-year gap year, and she ended up staying in it for 7 years. And after this 7-year period of kind of being drawn into this program, she realized that she had been spiritually abused. She calls it a cult, essentially. And she had started a website called My Cult Life, where she was basically blogging about her experiences and this fine line between, in a similar way to Mercy, going into a program that seemed like it was going to provide her direction and support and help her deal with some personal issues, and then being spiritually manipulated into living this life in this, kind of being, in a way, trapped in this community that she really felt like if she left it, she would be cut off from God forever. So she stayed for 7 years. So she started this website, My Cult Life, blogging about her experiences, and a number of women who'd been through Mercy found it and started contacting her because her experience really resonated with them in terms of what they had been through. And she and I had been corresponding on Twitter, and so at a certain point, she contacted me and she said, I'm getting emails from all these women who've been through this other program. I think you should, if you're interested, you should look into it. And so that's how I got turned on to Mercy specifically. And then, I've been interested in mental health interventions for a while. I've done a lot of reporting on veterans and post-traumatic stress disorder, and looking at kind of alternative healing interventions, like Native American healing interventions, that kind of thing. So I've done a lot of reporting kind of in that vein. Never really looking at it from the Christian perspective, but my interest in kind of alternate approaches to mental health is kind of always there.
Yes, such an important topic. And I know that, you talked with several young women, you talked with several families, and they were willing to talk about their experiences. I wonder, what do you think that the families and the young women themselves hope will come out of this article? And what do you hope will come out of this article being published?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so some of the families, in fact, everyone I've spoken to for this story, I mean, not everybody would go on record with their name, but some people did, and this is the first time that they have ever gone out on the record with their name before. I mean, especially some of the families that lost their daughters, like, kind of came to the conclusion after a number of years that they have to start speaking out and telling their story. I mean, they've been afraid to tell their story, because when you're accused of, really horrific abuse, there can be major repercussions, obviously, on your social life, on your livelihood. I mean, families have been worried about, having their businesses shut down because customers stop coming to them if they're, accused rapists.
Right.
But I think it came to a certain point where people realized that they want to get the story out there, because they want, if anyone is going to go to Mercy, they want to make sure that they know exactly what it is that they're going to find there and that they're going to be, experiencing. I think the families very much wish that they had investigated the program more thoroughly before they, I mean, you have to be 18 to go to most of the homes. So, the women could sign up on their own, but a lot of times they did this with the support of their families behind them. And I think a lot of the parents really feel like they just did not do their due diligence in really investigating what the program was about and what their kids would be experiencing. And so they want other parents to know what's going on there. I don't know. It's hard for me to say, what I hope the story accomplishes, really beyond, I guess, getting the word out there so that young women who are hurting can make choices that are best for them, that they really understand what the program offers, and that knowing that if they want to go, they should go. But that they, so that there's really a light that we can shine inside this process and this program, so that there's just no mistaking based on the marketing material.
Right.
Mercy says that thousands of women have gone through this program and have been positively impacted. It's impossible for me to know the extent to which that is true. I do believe that women have gone through the program and have had positive experiences, but the negative experiences have been sufficiently negative, and there have been enough of them that I want women to know what their options are, and especially if you're in a vulnerable situation, you don't have the money to see a private therapist, that it's not necessarily the godsend that it seems to be.
Is there a particular reason that it's women only at the facilities?
So the Mercy's founder, Nancy Alcorn, before she started Mercy, she worked for the state of Tennessee in their Department of Corrections, and she had worked, I think, at a girls' facility as an athletic director. So I think that it seems likely that that's what motivated her to receive, to want to bring in young women specifically.
Well, I know that as I, read the article and I felt such identification with these young women, although I had no experience with Mercy. Um, it really does highlight, um, particularly when it comes to mental health, and particularly when it comes to women's mental health, and the particular types of traumas that young women have often been exposed to or deal with, that religious authority can play either a very positive role, perhaps when it's not used authoritatively, but instead as a healing mechanism between equals. The healer and the person being healed as equals. But religious authority can really have a devastating effect. And I write about this a lot as well. And just being able to keep that the way that authority is used when we claim to be speaking for God or claim to be speaking for Jesus, and this is what Jesus would want you to do, or these 7 steps is what Jesus says you must do. We just really get into some really dangerous territory. So I think it's so important that you wrote this article. I can't thank you enough for all the time that you spent so meticulously researching this, and for publishing this for the rest of us to have access to. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Slate for providing the vehicle to really get this story out there.
Yeah, and we'll have the link below. So encourage everybody to read this piece. Thanks so much.
Thank you.